Thank you for tuning in to Coffee with Coral. First, a quick note. This recording is intended for general information only and is not meant to be considered specific legal advice. If specific legal advice is sought, please consult your LEA procedures or attorney as applicable. I'm Coral Wilkins, Special Education Project Manager at Region 10 Education Service Center, and welcome to this series of conversations about unlocking strategies to support your students. For you teachers, we'll also be talking about best practices that put the special in special ed. Today, my guest is my good friend, Dr. Caryn Sawlis. Dr. Sawlis is a behavior consultant with Region 10, and she has a wealth of information on stress in the brain. Please welcome Dr. Sawlis.
Thank you, Carl, and you can call me Caryn, and I really appreciate that introduction. Not only being a behavior consultant at Region 10, I always talk about the fact that I'm an English major at heart, so I love understanding the art of the story. And I think if we, as educators, we look at that story, I think it's very important. And so my journey really starts with being the English major and then going into ESL, but really honing in on how can I make my practice so much better as a teacher. And I went back and got a degree in brain-based research and curriculum instruction. How do you marry those two? And so I love talking about the brain. I apologize today if I talk too much about it, but I'm hoping that my experience as a teacher, as an administrator, and now as a consultant here at Region 10, talking about trauma-informed care, talking about stress, and talking about how stress is really the big culprit of why we act out the way we do, and how we can mitigate when those stressful situations happen in the classroom, and how we can't be so punitive and and be reactive, but being really proactive. And instead of asking the kid, why did you do that? And ask them, what happened?
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's such a powerful statement. What happened? Because often that why they can't tell you, not in the moment. So sometimes stress is really overwhelming to manage, and there's different types of stresses that we see in the classroom. Talk to us a little bit about what we see.
Yeah, thank you so much for talking about those three types of stresses. You have the positive stress, you have the tolerable stress, and you have you have toxic stress. And that positive stress, we need stress. A lot of people always say, oh, I'm so stressed out, I'm so stressed out. Well, we need stress. If we didn't have stress, then if your alarm went off at 9 o'clock and you had to be at work by 8, you go, oh my gosh, I got to get work. I got to get ready. I got to go to my job. And so that's that positive stress. You may have to go get a shot if you're 8 years old and you're getting ready to go back to school. Or the other day, I had a red light runner. It was my turn, ready to go. If it wasn't for the stress, I would have met him and I would have gotten T-boned. But the stress came out, stomped on my brake, probably said some things I probably shouldn't have said. And then I let him go. But I was good. I was breathing and I was fine. Right. That tolerable stress, it's those things that happen in our life continually. And for example, a couple of weeks ago, as you know, I was in the hospital.
Yes.
While I was in the hospital, I had my identity stolen.
Oh,
I know. And then while I was in the hospital, we had an undetected leak in our house. And so when I got out of the hospital, we didn't have water for a day. And they had to go underneath our house and fix the water leak. But again, all those things kind of mounted up. But the difference between tolerable stress and toxic stress is I had family. I had support. I had relationships. That toxic stress, which could possibly be abuse, neglect, constant criticism, that day in and day out stuff where there is no support. That's where we see the stress actually malforming the brain. And so there's three things with the brain that we really want to think about, those three items. You've got that prefrontal cortex. I kind of like to talk about it as the grandfather or Yoda, where it helps you regulate your emotions, your goal seeking, whether or not you're going to be able to make a good decision or not. And then you've got that amygdala. The amygdala has a tendency of being the highway patrolman of if it's going to go to the prefrontal cortex or it's going to go down to the hippocampus. And it deals with kind of your fear. I like to think of it as the smoke detector. I didn't coin that. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk talks about how that amygdala is a lot like that smoke detector. And when you have that toxic stress, it's like that smoke detector is constantly going off. And I don't know about you, Coral, but ever have a smoke detector in your house go beeping and you don't know which one it is in the house? Right. Well, that's what's going on in a lot of our kids' bodies, that smoke detector is going up because they're wondering, where are they feeling safe? And then you've got something called the hippocampus. And I like to think of that as a filing cabinet of your memories. And so the levels of stress, whether it's positive or tolerable or toxic, it could, a kid maybe forget to bring his homework. I don't know about you, when I'm stressed out, I have a tendency of losing car keys and my glasses. And so it affects us in so many ways, especially those three things of that prefrontal cortex where it shrinks, that hippocampus where it also shrinks, and then that amygdala where it has a tendency of growing. And so kids are showing signs of being like David Banner in The Incredible Hulk.
Right. That's really a great analogy because we've seen those kids.
Yes.
And sometimes when that happens as adults, we are just stuck. What do I do next? So what are some of the things that are stressful to the brain? And then how do these affect our students in the classroom?
And I really like the quote from Chaim Ganat where he says, students are a lot like wet cement. Whatever falls on them leaves an impression. And so stress is very subjective. You may think that you see a snake, and that's stressful. My son, we live in Garland, and on December 26th, a couple of years ago, EF4 tornado came through. And now he's always seeing, what is Pete Delkus, what is he showing? Oh, Mommy, I see a lot of the red and the yellows coming. Do I need to go for cover? But for someone maybe in Oklahoma, like one of our coworkers, Richard Heflin, he's like, a tornado, let me get my popcorn and camera ready. And so I say that to say that stress is very subjective. And so stress in a student could be something simple as, there's a test tomorrow. They have to read out loud. They may not have their lunch today. Maybe they're not wearing the clothes that are in style right now. Do I have food at home? Is this teacher having a safe environment for me? Are they getting bullied by cyberbullying? I just read an article, I believe it was from Child Mind Institute, where they talked about tweens already having issues with online chatting, and so that's affecting them as well. And do they have enough likes on Instagram? And so all of those things can be stressful to a student. I think as teachers, we have to remember that they're just kids, that they don't have the skill set yet. And cognitively, they haven't mastered the art of really trying to be able to self-regulate. And let's be honest, Coral, do all adults know how to self-regulate?
No, definitely not. So you talked about the students and some of the things that the teachers can look for. Tell me a little bit about, and tell our audience a little bit about, what happens to students who are under stress and then how it impacts their learning.
And the biggest thing is that hippocampus, they're not able to remember things. And so when the teacher scolds little Timmy because it's April and little Timmy doesn't remember where to put their backpack, they're not purposely not trying to go, Miss, where do I put my backpack? Again, maybe they didn't get food that morning. Maybe mom was having a rough morning, or maybe their clothes are wet. And so those things have tendency of hurting our memory. And so the amygdala that sits right on top of that hippocampus is going, hey, you're having a bad morning, you're having a bad morning. And the teacher goes, do you remember today is a test? And the kid goes, oh my goodness. No, I don't remember that we're having a test, and they're just off. And so teachers need to look out for those signs of kids who are stressed out. And it can be in many different ways. It could be some of those somatic symptoms where they've got the headache, they've got the tummy ache, they're going to the bathroom needing to go to the nurse. Some of my younger ones, you're going to see their fists are clenched, their nostrils are flaring, their shoulders are rounded, probably like mine are a little bit today. And so being able to read that and then knowing that kid well enough to say, hey, do you need to take a break? And it's okay. I get stressed out too. We live in a society where everything's great. Everything's wonderful. I live in a paradise, and look at my Facebook page. But behind the scenes, we're really going, oh my goodness, we're struggling. And so I think, letting everybody know, and kids as well, hey, I have a bad day too, and this is what I do. And I think adults need to talk about that as well. Yeah.
So tell us, this is my last question, and this is the piece where I really want to help our teachers. We know this information now, and we're feeling pretty good about this is stress and these are threats. Now, what are some things that teachers can do, some simple things to help just reduce those stress and the threats in the classroom, and for that student who's really working on learning, but they're just overwhelmed?
And to me, it's relationships. Having that wonderful relationship with that kid, knowing that kid so well that you can sing their song back to them. knowing their sparks. What does that kid like to do? Do they like to draw? Do they like to, is it sports? Is it music? And maybe that's the outlet that kid needs. I always ask the teachers, do you have a stress area in your room where the kid could either go read or just have a moment? And then again, having those relationships. Are you doing restorative practices? I didn't say this early on when I was introducing myself, but as a lead for restorative practices here for Region 10, why aren't we circling up and asking the kids, how are you doing today? Asking them, how do you feel when you're stressed out? And ask the kids what they're doing, and then again, use that as a modeling. And then the last thing I think is so important is just to stop and breathe. And again, not breathing from the shoulders, but taking that good belly breath. And sometimes we forget how to do that. And that may be just as simple as crossing your fingers behind your back, get that diaphragm engaged, and actually breathing. And maybe it's also getting some water. So again, just some simple tips to help teachers understand making those connections. I think that's the biggest thing, because they talk about how do you mitigate that toxic stress. It's having those protective factors, and that protective factors having at least a caring adult in your life or a relationship.
And it sounds like if we take some of those strategies, they're pretty simple. And I know that it seems like, that would be really easy, or that's all. Yeah. But those little strategies can take kids into their future.
No, definitely.
And so I've seen kids so many times where you're wondering what they're doing, and they're counting, or they're breathing, or whatever they're doing. I watched one little boy do one of these one day, and I was like, square breathing.
Oh yeah, that 4x4. Yes. I love that 4x4. But even as something simple as the butterfly tap. When kids are really stressed out, they can just go ahead and tap, or they can tap on their legs at the same time. It helps get that rhythm in there, and it helps get that cadence of, okay, I can do this. I can do this. So yeah. And I had to do that the other day too, as that red light runner had come through, and I was like, okay, breathing in, breathing out. I'm okay.
Well, Caryn, I just really appreciate having you here with us today. This is all the time we have left, so we're going to have to end our time. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Coral. I appreciate you and all that you're doing, and all that you're doing for our teachers out there.
Thanks, Caryn.
Thanks.
We hope you found this conversation helpful, and we appreciate you tuning in to Coffee with Coral. Please be sure to join us for future discussions. Also, check out the readings that accompany this module. Finally, share what you know. And remember, at Region 10, we're all about students, service, and solutions.